Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, a pretty big one, building wealth. It's a topic a lot of people are interested in, right?
Absolutely. And the material you sent us, it really dives into that, comparing two approaches through these fictional examples of Isaac the rich son and Daniel the poor son. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and our mission here is to break it all down for you, the listener.
Yeah.
We're going to extract the key takeaways, what really works, what doesn't, and present it all in a clear and engaging way so you can actually use this information to make some real progress. So let's jump in.
Sounds good.
So right off the bat, one of the most striking things that stood out to me was the fundamental difference in mindset, between Isaac and Daniel. It's not just about how much they earn, but it's about how they think about money, how they approach spending.
Yeah, exactly. It's about being proactive with your finances, not just reactive, right?
Right. And the material really emphasizes this through specific examples. Like, take Isaac buying a car. He didn't just go out and buy a brand new car at full price. He waited for the end of your clearances, and then he negotiated a 15% discount. 15%. That's huge.
That's a smart move. And it really underscores that proactive approach, thinking ahead, planning, and, actively seeking value.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just cars. Like, when Isaac was looking for a place to live, he didn't go for the most expensive neighborhood. He targeted foreclosures in desirable areas and ended up buying for 30% below market value.
Wow, that's instant equity.
Exactly. And then he rents out the basement for some extra cash flow.
See, that's smart thinking. He's making his assets work for him.
Totally.
Yeah.
Even with groceries, he's buying in bulk when things are on sale. So it's like at every turn, Isaac's looking for ways to maximize value and minimize his spending. It's a real contrast to Daniel.
Yeah, the material paints Daniel as more of a full price bills kind of guy, just paying whatever's asked, not really thinking strategically about his spending.
It makes you wonder, how much money is he leaving on the table, just by not being proactive?
This is a good question. And this brings up another key theme in the material investment, the whole idea of buying the future on discount.
Yeah, that's a powerful way to put it.
It really shifts the focus from just consuming in the present to building something for the long term. And that's where the idea of earning a salary, a job, even gets some critique in the material.
Oh, yeah. It talks about how relying solely on a job can actually hold you back because of the way we get paid, every 2 weeks, and then taxes come out. So by the time you get the money, it's already been delayed, and you've lost a bit of its potential.
Right. There are even some religious quotes in there about the importance of paying wages promptly, like the one from the Prophet Muhammad. And then there's one from Deuteronomy about paying workers at the end of each day.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems to be suggesting that if your money isn't working for you right away, you're kind of falling behind.
Yeah, definitely. And this leads into another big idea, diversification. The material talks about Isaac's investment portfolio as a symphony.
Ah, yeah, the symphony metaphor.
What did you make of that?
Well, it means he's got his money in a variety of different things, like stocks for growth potential, even though they can be a bit risky. And then he's got that rental income from the basement, which is more consistent and predictable. And then bonds, which are generally a bit safer.
So he's not putting all his eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And it means if one part of his portfolio isn't doing so well, the other parts can help buffer the impact. It's a much safer strategy compared to Daniel's one-note song, as the material calls it.
Yeah, just relying on that single paycheck. What happens if something happens to his job? He's much more vulnerable than Isaac.
And then there's that quote from Proverbs 13.22. It says, "A good person leaves an inheritance." And the material applies it to Daniel, saying he might end up with a pat on the back and a bill because he hasn't built that financial foundation to pass on.
It's a bit sobering, right?
Yeah, it is. And it makes you think, what steps can we take to avoid ending up in that situation?
Definitely. And that ties into another important distinction the material makes. Great deals versus cheap deals.
Yeah. It's not just about finding the lowest price for something. It's about getting real value, something that will benefit you in the long term, like investing in a good quality item that will last a long time, even if it costs a bit more upfront.
Right. There's that proverb about haste leads to poverty, meaning sometimes rushing into the cheapest option can actually hurt you financially down the road.
It's like that saying, buy cheap, buy twice.
Exactly. And the material introduces a concept from the Quran, al-Hakim, which emphasizes wisdom and value. choosing quality over fleeting bargains.
And there's some great examples to illustrate this, like Isaac's parents investing $50,000 in an S&P 500 index fund when he was born. It ended up growing to $430,000 over time. That's a great deal.
That's incredible.
Right. They saw the long-term potential and capitalized on it. Compare that to Daniel's parents paying full price for a college fund and giving him a pep talk. It's well-intentioned, but...
Not quite as impactful.
And here's another key point. It's not just about accumulating wealth for yourself. The material highlights how Isaac uses his financial security to live out the principle of al-Muhsin, the doer of good, by funding a free clinic with income from his rental property.
That's really inspiring. It shows how financial well-being can enable you to give back and make a real difference.
Exactly. And it leads to this question. How can we find these great deals like Isaac's parents did with the S&P 500?
Well, the material provides some concrete advice.
So for those of you listening, take notes. When it comes to stocks, it suggests investing in a low-cost S&P 500 exchange-traded fund, like VOO as mentioned, especially during market dips when prices are lower. It even gives an example. $500 a month for 20 years could potentially grow from $120,000 in contributions to around $260,000.
Wow, that's impressive.
Right. And in real estate, it recommends looking for properties in prime locations that might be undervalued and negotiating firmly on the price. They give an example of a $200,000 home negotiated down to $160,000, potentially appreciating to $300,000 in 10 years.
That's a significant return.
And for cars, it advises finding well-maintained options from motivated sellers, like during those end-of-month or end-of-year sales, when they're really trying to clear inventory.
So it's about being strategic and patient, not just jumping at the first thing you see.
Exactly. And the material even mentions some more advanced strategies like looking into distressed assets or understanding tax lands, but doesn't go into too much detail on those.
Right. That might be for another deep dive.
Now, one thing that really struck me about Daniel's situation is this idea of delayed compensation and how it seems he's always working for his money instead of his money working for him.
It's a key difference, isn't it?
The material brings up Deuteronomy 24.1415 again, about the importance of timely payment. And it contrasts Isaac's parents building him a machine that pays him through smart investments and financial decisions, with Daniel potentially building a trap that drains him.
That's a powerful image.
It is. It's like Daniel's purpose is tied to this cycle of constantly earning and spending, while Isaac has more financial freedom to pursue his purpose, on his own terms.
And this brings us back to the idea of value, which the material emphasizes isn't just about spending less, but about getting the most out of every dollar you spend.
Right. It even mentions Proverbs 24.5 about a wise man having great power. And it relates that to Daniel's seemingly less resourceful spending habits.
It suggests that true value isn't determined by the initial price, but by the long-term benefit you get from your spending.
Like Isaac buying that duplex and renting out a unit for a profit. It's about maximizing the return on your investment. And the material contrasts this with Daniel's potentially debt-ridden college experience, where the financial return might not be as clear or immediate.
And it's interesting how the material keeps bringing up the connection between financial well-being and generosity, like with Isaac donating to a food bank.
Yeah, it emphasizes that having your finances in order can actually free you up to be more generous and have a positive impact on your community. And speaking of maximizing value, the material offers some really practical advice on how to get the most with the least in everyday life.
Oh, I'm curious about that. What kind of advice?
Well, for housing, it talks about house hacking, buying a multi-unit property, and renting out a portion to offset your own housing costs. It gives an example of how Daniel's $2,000 rent could potentially become a net cost of $700 through this strategy.
That's a big difference.
Right. And for transportation, it suggests choosing fuel-efficient vehicles to save money on gas and maintenance, like opting for a hybrid over a gas guzzler.
Makes sense.
And for food, it's the classic advice.
Okay.
Cook at home. It's almost always cheaper than eating out or ordering takeout.
Agreed. It's healthier too, usually.
And then it talks about fitness, like investing in some home gym equipment instead of paying for a monthly gym membership. That one-time cost can save you a lot over the long run.
Especially if you actually use it.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
And then it touches on things like switching to LED light bulbs and using a smart thermostat to save on utilities. And for clothing, it recommends exploring secondhand options or investing in durable, versatile pieces that will last.
So it's really about being mindful of your spending in all areas of life.
Yeah. And for the more experienced folks, it even mentions things like investing in rental sheds for passive income, exploring dividend-paying stocks, and even negotiating the price of appliances.
Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, debt. The material really paints a stark picture of the crushing burden of debt, particularly for Daniel.
It does. It highlights how delaying investment and making less than ideal financial choices can easily lead to debt, especially that high-interest debt. And it puts a number on it. Daniel could be paying $11,800 a year in interest alone.
Ouch. It's a lot of money that could be going towards building wealth instead.
Exactly. But it's not all doom and gloom. The material offers some strategies for tackling debt, like utilizing 0% balance transfer cards and employing the debt stacking technique.
Can you elaborate on those?
So with balance transfers, it's about moving your high-interest debt to a card with a 0% introductory APR to save on interest charges, even if there's a transfer fee. And debt stacking is about prioritizing which debts to pay off first, either focusing on the smallest ones to build momentum or targeting the ones with the highest interest rates to minimize the overall cost.
It's about being strategic with your debt repayment plan.
And again, the material contrasts Isaac, who's largely avoided this debt trap thanks to his upbringing, with Daniel, who's potentially a debt mule, carrying a heavy financial burden.
Now, the material also talks about credit cards, but this time in a more positive light, right?
Yes, it's about leveraging credit card rewards wisely. It contrasts the potential benefits, like sign-up bonuses and rewards points, with the downsides of carrying a balance and paying high interest.
So it's about using credit strategically, not letting it use you.
Exactly. It even gives examples of rewards you can earn on things like rent, car repairs, travel, business supplies. And it quantifies the potential long-term value of those rewards, especially if you reinvest them.
It's about making your spending work for you.
Right. And it contrasts this with Daniel, who might be racking up interest charges instead of reaping those rewards. It then gets really practical, talking about how to maximize rewards on everyday things like gas, bills, even your daily coffee.
So even small things can add up over time.
Exactly. And it really emphasizes the difference between consistently earning and investing those rewards versus paying interest on debt.
Now, let's talk about what the material calls the ultimate cheat code in wealth building, starting early.
Oh yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah.
It highlights the incredible power of compound interest. Basically the idea that your money starts making money and then that money makes more money.
It's like a snowball effect.
And the earlier you start, the more time that snowball has to grow. They even quote Proverbs 22.6 again about training up a child in the way he should go and apply it to financial education.
Early habits stick.
And they really drive this point home by comparing the potential outcomes for someone who starts investing at birth versus someone who waits until they're 25.
I bet the difference is huge.
Yes. The examples show how Isaac, because he started so early, could accumulate way more wealth by ages 35, 55, and 70 compared to Daniel, who might only start later. They even run different scenarios, showing the impact of starting early with various amounts of money, both lump sums and monthly contributions, and for different beneficiaries like children, teens, even grandparents.
It really shows that time is your greatest asset.
Absolutely. And it leads to the next question, where should you put your money? The material suggests a 1-2 punch strategy, investing in the S&P 500 and in what you know.
That's an interesting approach.
It's about combining broad market exposure with personal expertise. The S&P 500, as we talked about before, gives you a piece of 500 of the largest companies in the U.S. It's a solid foundation for growth. And then the second part is to also invest in areas you understand or are passionate about.
So leveraging your knowledge.
Exactly. They quote Proverbs 24.3 about building a house through wisdom and understanding to illustrate this concept. And they give the example of Isaac's parents investing in the S&P 500 for him early on and then encouraging him to invest in his passion, which is drones.
It's about combining a solid base with strategic investments in areas you know well.
And they contrast this with Daniel, who might have a less strategic college fund and a 401k he doesn't fully understand. They then go on to show the potential returns of the S&P 500 historically and how having expertise in a specific sector like healthcare for Daniel or drones for Isaac could lead to even greater gains.
So it's about doing your research and finding opportunities that align with your knowledge.
And they even present scenarios showing the different outcomes for Daniel investing in medical stocks later versus Isaac investing in drones early. They really emphasize the combined power of this dual approach.
Now, let's talk about another key area for building wealth: real estate. The material specifically highlights the idea of a discount home in a prime area.
Yeah, it's about applying that value investing mindset to the housing market. Proverbs 24.3 comes up again here, emphasizing the importance of wisdom and understanding when building a house, literally in this case. And they detail Isaac buying that foreclosure in a desirable area, talking about his mortgage terms, the rental income, and the appreciation of the property over time.
It's a great example of how to build wealth through real estate.
And they contrast this with Daniel, who might be renting and missing out on those opportunities for equity building and appreciation. They then offer some other real estate strategies, like buying below market value, investing in multifamily properties to rent out units, and even flipping houses.
So there are various ways to approach real estate for wealth building.
And they give specific examples with numbers, showing the potential returns from different strategies over different time frames. Now, the material doesn't shy away from a potentially sensitive topic: the financial return on education.
Yeah, that can be a touchy subject.
It presents the argument that some fields, particularly STEM, law, and skilled trades, tend to offer a better financial return than others.
And they quote Proverbs 21.5 about diligent plans leading to profit, right?
Yes. And they use Isaac as an example, showing how his combination of early S&P 500 investment and trade school education led to early income and more opportunity for investing. They contrast this with Daniel's expensive medical education, which could come with a lot of debt that takes years to repay.
So it's suggesting that some degrees might not be the best investment financially.
But it's not a simple black and white issue. The material acknowledges that while some fields might inherently offer better average returns, smart financial management during your education can make a big difference.
So it's not just about what you study, but also how you manage your finances while you're studying.
Exactly. Like seeking scholarships, minimizing debt, being strategic about loans. It emphasizes that careful planning can improve the value of any education, though it's not a guaranteed path to riches.
Now let's move on to another crucial habit: automating your savings.
It's about making saving and investing a consistent, effortless process. They quote Proverbs 21.20 here about the wise storing up choice food and oil, highlighting the importance of planning for the future. And they describe Isaac automatically investing over 50% of his income into things like a total stock market index fund, XLG, is given as an example.
That's a high savings rate.
It is. And they emphasize the role his parents played in instilling this habit from a young age. And they show, with numbers, how powerful this consistent automation can be over time. They contrast it with Daniel, who might have more inconsistent saving habits.
So it's about setting it up and letting it run, taking the emotion and effort out of saving.
Exactly. And the material compares Isaac's projected wealth accumulation through automated investing with Daniel's more ad hoc approach, and the difference is pretty significant.
Automation for the win.
Definitely. Now, the material also talks about aligning your investments with your values.
I like that idea. Investing in things you believe in.
Yeah, it's about putting your money where your heart is. They quote Matthew 6.21 here. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
That's a good one.
And they highlight Isaac investing in renewable energy and drones, things he's passionate about, and show how those investments have grown. They contrast it with Daniel's 401k, which might not feel as personally meaningful, especially while he's dealing with student loan debt.
So it's about finding investments that resonate with you, that you feel good about supporting.
And they show how consistent investment in those areas, even if they're niche, can have a real impact over time. They compare Isaac's overall portfolio growth with Daniel's less engaged approach.
It's about making your money work for you and for the causes you care about.
Exactly. And that leads to another important point: teaching wealth to the next generation.
Financial education for kids. That's so important.
It is. The material talks about the lasting impact of instilling financial literacy early on. Proverbs 22.6 comes up again here, emphasizing the value of early training.
It's about setting them up for success.
And they highlight Isaac's parents actively teaching him about money from a young age, contrasting it with Daniel's parents, whose focus might have been more on academic achievement.
So it's not just about telling them to go to college, it's about teaching them how to manage money.
Exactly. And they provide examples of how even small amounts saved and invested early for kids can grow significantly over their lifetime.
Time is on their side.
And they contrast that with Daniel's kids, who might not have that financial foundation. It's about leaving a legacy of financial knowledge, not just assets.
Now let's talk about a crucial tool for tracking your financial progress: The material calls it your financial compass.
Yeah, it's about knowing where you stand financially. They quote Proverbs 27.23 here about knowing the condition of your flocks, emphasizing the importance of being aware of your financial situation. And they detail Daniel's situation, how despite potentially having a high income, he might not have a clear grasp of his net worth because of debt.
So it's not just about how much you make, it's about what you keep.
And they quantify his debt and his 401k growth, showing how that debt can hold him back. They then contrast it with Isaac, who meticulously tracks his assets and liabilities, giving him a clear picture of his growing net worth.
So Isaac knows where he stands and can make informed decisions based on that knowledge.
Exactly. And they show how different career paths and financial habits can lead to vastly different net worths over time. They even explain the formula for calculating net worth assets minus liabilities and stress its importance for long-term financial health.
It's about having a clear roadmap for your financial journey.
Now, let's revisit the idea of selling your knowledge as a way to increase your income.
Yeah, monetizing your skills and expertise.
The material contrasts Daniel, the skilled surgeon, with Isaac, the electrician who's making extra money by selling online courses. They show how different professions can create and sell knowledge-based products like ebooks, courses, webinars, and generate additional income streams.
It's about leveraging what you know to create value for others and for yourself.
And they highlight the scalability of this approach compared to trading your time for money. They emphasize the difference in potential financial outcomes between someone like Isaac, who's actively selling his knowledge, and Daniel, who might not be.
Now let's talk about building a fortress of financial security through multiple income streams.
It's about diversifying your income sources, not relying solely on one job. They quote Ecclesiastes 11.2 here about dividing your portion to 7 or 8, emphasizing the importance of not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Spreading the risk.
And they detail Isaac's multiple income streams. His trade work, his online courses, his investments. They contrast this with Daniel's reliance on just his salary.
So if something happens to his job, Daniel's in a much more vulnerable position.
Exactly. And they provide examples of how someone with a traditional job can create additional income streams, like blogging, creating courses, investing, rental income, YouTube. They emphasize how this diversification leads to a more robust net worth and cash flow.
It's about creating a safety net for yourself and your family.
Now let's come back to a fundamental principle. Frugality. It's about spending less than you earn, consistently. Proverbs 21.20 comes up again here about the wise storing up choice food and oil.
It's a classic principle, but so important.
They contrast Isaac's frugal lifestyle and high savings rate with Daniel's higher spending and lower savings, even though Daniel might have a higher income.
It's not about how much you make, but how much you keep.
And they show how even small daily savings can add up to significant wealth over time. They also highlight the freedom and flexibility that frugality provides.
Yeah, it gives you more control over your life.
They contrast Isaac's control over his finances with Daniel's potential paycheck-to-paycheck existence. And they dig deeper into the rebellion against spending mindset, the idea of consciously living below your means.
So it's not just about being thrifty, it's about making a deliberate choice to live simply.
They detail Isaac's cost-saving habits, like mending clothes, cooking at home, bartering, and his low annual budget. They contrast this with Daniel's potentially unnecessary expenses, like expensive coffees, gadgets, subscriptions, a fancy car.
It's about being mindful of your spending and choosing experiences over things.
And they highlight the non-monetary benefits of this approach, like having more time, energy, and peace of mind.
Now let's revisit that vampire of debt, the dangers of consumer borrowing.
It's about avoiding debt for things that don't appreciate in value. Proverbs 22.7 comes up again, about the borrower being a slave to the lender. They detail Daniel's potential consumer debt, like car loans and credit card balances, and the associated costs.
It's about understanding that debt can really hold you back.
And they contrast this with Isaac's debt-free lifestyle. They emphasize the importance of avoiding unnecessary debt while acknowledging that some debt, like for education or a mortgage, can be strategic if used wisely.
Now, let's touch on the importance of passing on the torch of financial literacy to your children.
They emphasize teaching your kids about money. The material contrasts Daniel's kids, who might not have a strong financial understanding, with Isaac's niece or nephew, who's being mentored by Isaac.
It's about setting them up for success, right?
And they show how even small lessons and involvement can make a difference, emphasizing the value of leaving a legacy of financial knowledge, not just money.
And finally, let's talk about the power of automating your finances.
They go into detail about how setting up automated systems for saving, investing, and bill payments can make a huge difference. They contrast Daniel's manual approach with Isaac's fully automated system.
It's about taking the hassle and emotion out of managing your money.
And they explain the benefits of automation: enforcing discipline, leveraging compounding, freeing up mental space. They even offer tips on how to set it up using direct deposit splits and apps.
So it's about putting your finances on autopilot so you can focus on other things.
Exactly. And they reiterate the significant long-term impact, showing how much Isaac could potentially accumulate compared to Daniel.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we see two very different approaches to building wealth.
Absolutely. Isaac's journey is marked by proactive financial management, maximizing value, investing early and diversifying, creating multiple income streams, embracing frugality, avoiding debt, continuous learning, leveraging resources, negotiating, minimalism, and automation.
While Daniel's path seems to be characterized by a more reactive approach, missed opportunities, delays in investing, reliance on a single income source, and a less systematic approach to money.
It's clear that building wealth is about more than just how much you earn. It's about the choices you make and the habits you develop.
And our listener now has a much clearer understanding of those key principles.
So here's a final thought for you to ponder. What one or two actionable steps can you take today to implement the rich son principles in your own life? What small change can you make that could have a significant impact on your financial future?
Think about which approach resonates more with you: Isaac's proactiveness or Daniel's more passive stance.
And remember, building wealth is a journey, not a destination. Every step you take in the right direction brings you closer to your financial goals.
Start today and keep moving forward.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, follow for more updates, and don't forget to sign up for the exclusive bonuses down below.
Listen up, traders, it's your lucky day. Quick gains and sights is here to stay. Subscribe now, come join the fray. Financial wisdom will light your way. Join Quick Gains Insights today. Like this video, pave the way. Sign up in the description, without delay. 4,000 free insights today. Like this video, pave the way. Sign up in the description without delay. 4,000 free, let's slay.